Welcome to Business Review, a daily program that delves into the latest and most significant economic stories. From stock markets to currency news, Business Review covers the most up-to-date developments in the global financial world.
European Council President Charles Michel said on March 27th that the European Union is prioritizing maintaining open borders for goods to flow and the hunt for a vaccine against the coronavirus. Speaking after 6 hours of talks with the 27 member states, the European Council President said the leaders agreed to task the Eurozone finance ministers to work out in 2 weeks details of a special credit line within the single currency zone's bailout fund to support economies hit by coronavirus. The fight over the scale and scope of the EU's economic response to the pandemic pits Italy and Spain, seeking far-reaching measures against Germany and the Netherlands, demanding to spare resources for later if need be. Since the disease arrived in Europe, the EU has struggled to present a united front on economic stimulus, the sharing of medical equipment, and safeguarding of essential supplies after countries across the continent tightened or closed their normally open borders to try and curb the spread of the respiratory disease.
European lawmakers overwhelmingly agreed on Thursday, March 26th, to suspend until October 24th a rule requiring airlines to use at least 80% of their flight slots to keep the following year so as to ease an industry crisis unleashed by the coronavirus pandemic, following a deal reached last week by envoys of the European Union's 27 member states. The European Parliament voted in its first ever remote session in Brussels to suspend the EU slots rule until the summer season ends in late October, as European flights fell 60% this week, with several major airlines forced to ground their fleets. The last time the EU waived the airport slots rule was in 2009 because of the financial crisis. EU governments will still need to approve the final agreement, but that is seen as a formality. British Finance Minister announced on Thursday, March 26, that his country will pay grants to self-employed people who have lost their livelihoods because of the coronavirus lockdown, further extending an unprecedented package of measures to prevent the economy from collapsing. Finance Minister Rishi Sunak said Britain's government would pay those self-employed people who had been adversely affected by the coronavirus a taxable grant worth 80% of their average monthly profits over the last 3 years, up to £2,500 or $3,000 a month. The minister added that self-employed workers will have to last out until mid-June for the scheme to kick in, and they must also wait to be contacted by tax authorities. About 15% of Britain's workers are self-employed. Governments around the world are scrambling to avert economic catastrophe, underlined on Thursday by shock figures from the United States, showing that more than 3 million Americans applied for unemployment benefits last week.
Britain made an emergency order of 10,000 medical ventilators designed at breakneck speed by vacuum cleaner maker Dyson, billionaire founder James Dyson said on March 25th, as the country tries to boost the number of devices available to treat coronavirus patients. The government had made an urgent appeal to manufacturers to supply the National Health Service and would also use devices from private hospitals and other sources. Prime Minister Boris Johnson's spokesman said earlier on Wednesday Britain had been in talks with over 3,000 businesses about supplying ventilators to quickly increase the health services capacity, adding that any design would need regulatory approval. The country's existing stock of about 5,000 to 8,000 ventilators is inadequate if cases jump as predicted. The number of coronavirus deaths in Britain rose by 41 to reach 465 on Wednesday. Dyson said since receiving a call from Johnson 10 days ago, he had refocused resources at his company and worked with TTP, the technology partnership, to design and build an entirely new ventilator, the Covent. It deployed its expertise in air movement, motors, power systems, manufacturing and supply chain, gained from its products like air purifiers and fans, as well as cleaners, to develop the ventilator from scratch. The company, which revolutionized the vacuum cleaner market with its bagless cyclonic device in the 1990s, said it would work with regulators and government to ensure that the product and the manufacturing process were approved. Dyson said it was a time of grave international crisis and he would therefore donate 5,000 units to the international effort, 1,000 of which would go to the United Kingdom. Separately, British engineer Babcock International Group P1C said it had joined forces with the leading medical equipment company to design and supply thousands of critical care ventilators. A number of other firms had joined forces to potentially develop and manufacture a ventilator, including Airbus, Smiths Group, P1C, Ford Motor Company, and McLaren. India announced on March 26th a 1.7 trillion rupee or $23 billion economic stimulus plan, providing direct cash transfers and food security measures to give relief to millions of poor people hit by a nationwide lockdown over a coronavirus pandemic. People queued in some cities for essential items, with trucks stranded at state borders and public transport suspended 2 days after Prime Minister Narendra Modi ordered the 21-day lockdown to protect a population of 1.3 billion. The government aims to distribute 5 kilograms of stable food grains of wheat or rice for each person free of cost, with a kilogram of pulses for every low-income family, hoping to feed about 800 million poor people over the next 3 months.
Wuhan City is preparing to reopen 6 key subway lines to the public on Saturday as travel bans are lifted across central China's Hubei province, with the epidemic situation in China's worst hit area continuing to improve. The city, which bore the brunt of the COVID-19 outbreak in China, will reopen the routes after conducting 5 days of consecutive test runs on the trains. After services were suspended for more than 2 months, staff of the Wuhan subway group are hard at work cleaning and disinfecting every corner of the city's mass transit system, ensuring stations and train carriages are safe for passengers when it opens back up for service. The subway, which forms an important part of Wuhan's public transit system, was shut down on January 23rd when the city was officially locked down to contain the spread of the outbreak. When the situation improving in Wuhan, transit authorities decided to restart subway services to meet the public demand for commuting. However, virus prevention remains a top priority, and subway authorities are taking every necessary precaution to make sure all passengers who enter stations and board trains will be safe. According to the Wuhan subway group, infrared temperature sensing systems have been installed at subway stations, which will detect the temperatures of all those seeking to enter. Passengers also need to scan a special health certificate obtained via QR code after entering the station, and only those with green health codes will be allowed to get on the subway. The reopening of the subway comes as more railway services are beginning to resume operations in Hubei, with the first trains arriving and departing on Wednesday. The China Railway Wuhan Group said inbound trains are also set to start arriving in 17 train stations across Wuhan from Saturday, while services departing Wuhan will resume on April 8th.
This has been Business Review, your daily source for the most critical financial stories. Tune in next time for the latest financial news impacting the world economy.